So I get many, many questions about attachment styles and sex. And in this video, I want to take you through the anxious preoccupied and their top triggers around their relationship to sex and some things to be mindful of. Because as an anxious preoccupied, or even if you're a fearful avoidant with a strong anxious side, these are things that may show up in your relationship to sex and intimacy and things that can actually sort of spoil the connection or the ability to have intimacy in sex as a whole. So, one of the first things is that anxious preoccupieds tend to have this big fear of abandonment, as we know. And that fear of abandonment, that core wound, I will be abandoned, can actually drive the anxious preoccupied's relationship to sex. Meaning that sometimes anxious preoccupied will use sex as a strategy for connection and also a strategy to avoid their fear of abandonment, rather than being in a relationship to sex and intimacy that's driven by their truth. In other words, sometimes anxious preoccupied, if they feel somebody pulling away, may try to close the proximity by having sex with that person. Anxious preoccupied may also, at times in relationships, when they don't feel like having sex, or maybe they're feeling not sexually connected to a person yet that they're dating, they may feel this sort of pressure to have sex because, in the back of their mind, at a core wound level, if they don't, that abandonment could ensue. And so anxious preoccupieds can sometimes make sexual choices and decisions from a fear of abandonment rather than from being in alignment with the truth about their own needs, their own boundaries, and their own feelings about different situations. So it's something really important to assess if you are an AP and just like really hone in on and check in with and, check in like, what are my boundaries? What are my needs around sex? What is important to me? Because when you're making choices from truth rather than fear, everything in your life goes better. And there's also this inherent self-abandonment um in making choices that are not aligned with your truth, right? If you're making a choice about your relationship to sex to please somebody else, but it goes against your truth, you sort of betrayed and abandoned yourself in that process. So that's one big thing. Another huge core wound that can show up in the AP's relationship to sex is the fear of being not enough. Now, anxious preoccupied individuals will put a lot of pressure, a lot of expectation on themselves in relationship to this wound. They'll try to feel like, you know, everything's going perfectly. There can't be any, mistakes around sex or problems or things can't go wrong in any way. And rather than sex being about being present, being connected, being vulnerable, rather than those things being in there for an AP, sometimes when there's this background sort of pressure on, did you do a good enough job? Are you being enough in some way? It's like that pressure can really rob intimacy. It can really lead to intimacy breakdowns. It can make the anxious preoccupied's experience of sex really disconnected. Like it can make the anxious preoccupied individual feel like it's just sex is just about the other person rather than this mutual exchange of intimacy as a whole. And it can also lead them to feeling rejected very easily around things. Like if somebody has feedback around sex or wants to communicate or talk about sex, because anxious preoccupieds are often seen through this wound of, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough, or what if I don't do enough? They can easily feel not good enough or rejected in that case if there's communication about sex that goes less than perfectly. By the way, there's a few other ones I'm going to talk about here, but an important thing is if you are struggling with your relationship to sex as an anxious preoccupied person and you want to actually take time to like assess your own boundaries, your own needs, your own authentic relationship to sex, and also remove some of these core wounds and reprogram them, then we've got a course you can check out for free for 14 whole days using the link below. And it's a limited time offer, so you can jump in there before it all goes away. And the 14-day free trial gives you access not just to our course called Attachment Styles and Sex, where obviously you can unpack each attachment style's relationship to sex, but yours as an AP, and really go through some of the different dynamics and the healing required. And there's steps and strategies and a workbook and everything there for you. But you also get access to all of the live webinars I do every week. So there's 4 of them, and you can jump in there with your camera on. You can jump in with your camera off and just speak if you'd like in your questions, or you can type them in the chat, whatever you prefer. And I'm there 4 times a week to answer any questions you might have. So the link down below is for that, and it's limited time for 14 days. Other core wounds that can show up for anxious preoccupieds around sex Are the feelings of being unseen and unheard, because APs are sometimes not really seeing and hearing their own needs, their own preferences, their own boundaries, because they're so busy being externally focused on that other person. And it can leave the AP kind of feeling like, hey, what about me? Like, do my needs not matter? Am I not seen? But at its root, oftentimes it's the anxious preoccupied's relationship to themselves sort of spilling into that. So really important to pay attention to. And then another big one, is that the anxious preoccupied, because they're kind of disrespecting their own boundaries at times, can easily feel disrespected around their relationship to sex. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, people can do disrespectful things. Of course, people can not see and hear you. Like, it's not just only the anxious preoccupied, of course. Like, that can happen. But if you're seeing and hearing yourself, you'll immediately speak up. You'll set a boundary. You'll have your own back. You'll make yourself feel protected. And that will actually help so much of the pain and suffering go away. So the reason I'm really trying to highlight some of these things and focus on them is that it's already this injustice once that the AP, because of their own past trauma, has been conditioned to be so focused on everybody but themselves. And that hurts. And that leads to this like emptiness inside, which is constantly causing you to fear this abandonment, fear being alone with yourself, fear, all these different dynamics. And so by sharing some of these things that you may be doing in your own relationship to sex subconsciously, not your fault, but it's yours to be able to heal, yours to be able to change. And that puts the power back in your hands again. So really, really important to be mindful of your boundaries, learn your needs, learn to express and communicate about sex in a healthy way so that you can talk about boundaries or talk about needs or preferences or desires or any of those different things. And then also to make sure that you get present in your own experience of sex, get present in your own body, rather than, because of that fear, because of that trauma, subconsciously use it as a tool for closeness. It can be a great tool for closeness, but as long as you are involved, right? Your needs, your boundaries are actually involved in that closeness. So really, really important to pay attention to. So anyways, that's it for today and this video. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know any other questions you have about anxious preoccupieds and sex, or any attachment style and sex. Please leave them in the comments below. I'm going to make more videos around some of these different topics. And again, you can check out for a limited time that 14-day free trial to PDS for Black Friday. And thank you so much for being here. And please subscribe if you're enjoying this channel as well. I would so appreciate it.